If you need any assistance, please contact us through channel 16 and ultra-high frequency. China's state-run media, the Global Times, proudly claims that the Chinese Navy has conducted over 7,200 escort missions in the waters of the Gulf of Aden. It claims itself the guardian of freedom of navigation, but behind this glossy image lies an unknown truth. On the evening of November 26, 2023, at 5 p.m., an Israeli oil tanker named Central Park heading north in the Red Sea was attacked at the Gulf of Aden. In the vicinity, 3 Chinese warships ignored the distress signal from the oil tanker. Instead, the U.S. Navy destroyer Mason swiftly arrived at the scene and dispatched helicopters, successfully capturing 5 fleeing Somali pirates on the high seas. The Mason fulfilled its mission by responding to the MV Central Park. Just at that moment, 2 ballistic missiles from the Houthi-controlled area of Yemen landed in the sea, 10 nautical miles away from the 2 ships. According to Chinese sources, the 3 escort warships can quickly identify the distressed vessels upon receiving any distress signals. Whether they decided to provide assistance is a more intricate matter. Let's imagine for a moment what would happen if the Chinese Navy did decide to protect the Israeli oil tanker in this region. This could potentially stir up significant international political controversy. The well-known tensions between Israel and Iran make the situation particularly sensitive. As a traditional ally of Iran, how would the CCP justify its providing escort to Israel? Imagine if the CCP's warships were to intervene, the potential scenario could involve a retaliatory response from the Houthi armed group in the form of ballistic missiles. This would be a diplomatic spectacle for China, a move that would be embarrassing and damaging to its international image. From the perspective of the leadership of the escort fleet, this would be a nightmare scenario. If such an action were taken, they might have to reconsider their positions. Furthermore, since 2008, the CCP Navy has explicitly stated that they only protect Chinese ships and United Nations humanitarian vessels. But behind this selective action lies a deeper secret. Sources have revealed that the CCP has quietly transported precursor explosives to the Middle East under the guise of humanitarian aid supplies. Since these substances appear as harmless white crystalline powder, their true nature remains unknown. This appears to be a cunning and dangerous strategy aimed at developing influence in the Middle East and engaging in geopolitical competition with the U.S. In the past 3 months, China has been blamed for providing support to Houthi attacks on merchant ships in the Red Sea, citing Israel's actions in the Gaza Strip as a trigger. The fear is that if Israel were to gain control of Gaza, it could obtain a significant amount of Hamas weaponry, supplies, and documents. This could potentially expose direct CCP support for Hamas and position the CCP as a backer of a terrorist organization, leading to global condemnation. Thus, the CCP fundamentally supports the Houthi armed group. On the other hand, excessive actions by both the CCP and Iran, allowing Houthi attacks on ships in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, could directly threaten the oil exports and foreign trade security of Sunni-majority countries. This could trigger economic crisis and social unrest in various Middle Eastern nations, fueling strong opposition from the populations and elites against the CCP. Take Egypt, for example. Houthi attacks on merchant ships could significantly reduce revenue from the Suez Canal, leading to financial turmoil and social unrest in the country. If Saudi Arabia's oil cannot be exported, the CCP's peace efforts between Saudi Arabia and Iran may prove futile. Such a situation undoubtedly undermines Xi Jinping's credibility and geopolitical influence in the Middle East. The CCP's economy is heavily reliant on Middle Eastern oil and natural gas, as well as smooth global shipping. But due to the continuous terrorist attacks by the Houthi armed group, the CCP is facing the risk of becoming the biggest loser in this crisis. Recently, the freight rates on the Shanghai to Europe route have skyrocketed by 4 times. The Drewry Ocean Freight Index for the Shanghai to Genoa and Rotterdam routes has also increased 4-fold. According to data from Freightos, the spot freight rate for a 40-foot container from Asia to Northern Europe has reached $4,000, a staggering 173% increase compared to mid-December of 2023. The crisis caused by the Houthi armed group has disrupted the shipment of automotive parts from China to Europe, leading to Tesla having to temporarily shut down its European factory. China relies on imports for 71% of its oil, with over half of that coming from the Middle East. Its stockpile of oil stands at a staggering 400 million tons, enough to meet its consumption needs for about 240 days. But if the situation in the Middle East further deteriorates into a wider conflict that affects hydrocarbon facilities in the Gulf region, the supply of crude oil and liquefied natural gas via sea routes could be disrupted for weeks or even longer. In such a scenario, China would face partial or temporary disruptions in economic activities, a significant blow to the world's second-largest economy. On January 10th and 14th, the CCP issued unusual criticism of the Houthi armed group's actions. During the January 10th meeting, the CCP's permanent representative to the United Nations stated that the Houthi armed group in the Red Sea waters has repeatedly attacked and detained commercial ships, disrupting the international trade order. China called on the Houthi group to immediately cease its actions against civilian vessels and respect the freedom of navigation of all countries in the Red Sea waters. Following this, on January 14th, CCP Foreign Minister Wang Yi, after a meeting with Egyptian Foreign Minister Sema Shukri, expressed deep concern over the escalating situation in the Red Sea and called for an end to actions of harassment of civilian vessels in order to maintain the smooth flow of global production and supply chains and the international trade order. Clearly, China's economy is suffering a severe impact from the Red Sea crisis. One might wonder if China would have been so proactive in speaking out if its economic interests were not at stake. Let's also examine China's broader perspective. They often seem eager to stir things up in the Middle East to reduce American influence. But when the situation begins to affect their own financial interests, they hit the brakes, exposing their immature understanding and operational capabilities in the global political landscape. From a geopolitical standpoint, analyzing the CCP's deployment and actions in the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea regions, it becomes apparent that the CCP is primarily responding to international concerns about piracy while covertly expanding its geopolitical influence. In 2008, Somali pirates relentlessly seized commercial ships, posing a threat to the entire Gulf of Aden, including the waters east to Sri Lanka, making the entire Indian Ocean unsafe. The United Nations Security Council passed multiple resolutions authorizing the international community to combat piracy. For the CCP, this was a golden opportunity to expand its influence. The Gulf of Aden escort mission set sail on December 26, 2008, and was touted as the longest and largest deployment in its history. On one hand, they responded to the United Nations call. On the other, they expanded their influence in the Middle East, protected their economic interests, and had their eye on the Horn of Africa. China's active involvement in Middle Eastern oil fields began after the end of the Iraq War in 2003. In Iraq, China National Petroleum Corporation holds about 24% stake in the largest oil field in Iraq, the Rumaila oil field. In the UAE, the CCP holds 10% of the Bara field. In Oman, they have a 25% stake in the country's third largest oil field. When you add it all up, China's total oil field equity in the Middle East amounts to about 120 million tons per day, constituting about 20% of China's total crude oil imports. In 2017, the CCP officially opened its PLA support base in Djibouti, not only providing support for escort missions, but also handling the storage and transportation of peacekeeping forces supplies in Africa and the Middle East. It effectively radiated to countries like South Sudan and Ethiopia. This seems to serve the CCP's broader geopolitical ambitions. In the geopolitical competition in the Indian Ocean Pacific region, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Ethiopia, India, and Iran are critical areas. Currently, the CCP is concentrating its efforts on expanding its influence in Iran. If the CCP successfully spreads its influence to Ethiopia while strengthening its control over the Gulf of Aden through the Djibouti base, there is a possibility it could affect oil supplies to East Asia and weaken Western influence in the Indo-Pacific region. The CCP has supported Ethiopia's Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF, for nearly 30 years, until the true democratic government came to power in 2018. Prior to that, the TPLF-led government even emulated the Chinese model in internet censorship. Xi Jinping would definitely hope to rebuild ties with this faction if it regains power. In June 2020, the TPLF withdrew from the capital under the federal government's military assault and shifted to guerrilla warfare. An unexpected twist unfolded as the former Ethiopian foreign minister, Dr. Tedros, who served as the Director General of the World Health Organization from 2020 to 2022, allegedly provided assistance to the CCP. In return, the CCP is said to have meticulously planned to support the TPLF in overturning the Ethiopian government by the end of 2021. In January 2022, the CCP employed a clever tactic. Knowing that the Ethiopian government's military possessed Chinese-manufactured drones, they discreetly launched identical drones from Eritrea in northern Djibouti. The target was clear: to specifically target civilians in the Tigray region. Then on January 8th, this plot reached its climax. Several African countries began frenziedly reporting and extensively publicizing allegations that the Ethiopian government forces had bombed civilians in the Tigray region, resulting in 56 deaths and 30 injuries. This figure was enough to shock anyone. Consequently, the reputation of the Ethiopian government forces was tarnished overnight. But the reality was that this airstrike was allegedly orchestrated by the CCP. Xi Jinping's office reportedly also devised the next steps to assist the TPLF in orchestrating a military coup. The CCP's plan allegedly involved TPLF Special Operations Forces disguising themselves as civilians and stealthily approaching the Ethiopian capital. Subsequently, they planned to use Chinese drones to target government military commanders. Even more insidiously, the CCP purportedly planned for the TPLF to push civilians to the front lines as human shields, with a premeditated aim of causing casualties as high as 80,000 civilians, ultimately placing blame on government forces for indiscriminate killings. In this carefully orchestrated conspiracy, the CCP allegedly portrays its drones as American drones, with the aim of creating confusion and preventing U.S. intervention. To achieve this, the CCP has reportedly prepared a series of false pieces of information and is even said to be ready to provide pre-made photos and materials to the New York Times and some so-called friendly European journalists. If the U.S. cannot intervene, the CCP can purportedly manipulate clandestine networks and communication systems, spreading false information to mislead the public, claiming that the Ethiopian president was forced to step down and go into exile. The ultimate goal of this strategy, known as unrestricted warfare, is to regain control of Ethiopia's government, thereby advancing the CCP's strategic interests in Ethiopia and the entire Horn of Africa region. The individuals involved in these actions are allegedly military strategists at various levels, drones, and electronic equipment, all of which require support from naval fleets and the military base in Djibouti. The CCP's calculation is that Ethiopia's capital would likely be unable to resist. Once the capital is captured by the TPLF, Xi Jinping and his diplomatic department are reportedly prepared to recognize the new regime. CCP Foreign Minister Wang Yi is said to have been fully aware of these arrangements in late 2021 and early 2022. The TPLF has allegedly promised that once in power, it intends to establish an institution similar to China's Emergency Management Department, combining it with virus control to firmly control the local situation. In the political drama unfolding in Ethiopia, China's strategy appeared seamless, but it ultimately fell short due to the unsatisfactory performance of the TPLF in battles after 2022, resulting in a failure. Therefore, when observing the Chinese Navy's escort operations in the Gulf of Aden, it should be recognized as a carefully designed element of China's global geopolitical strategy. Their objectives extend beyond military superiority, aiming to influence and control political dynamics in the Middle East and the Horn of Africa through the multidimensional use of technology and strategy. Similarly, Western countries have been strategically positioning themselves in the Horn of Africa. In March 2023, Russia had planned to establish a naval base along the Red Sea coast in Sudan to counterbalance U.S. influence in the Persian Gulf. But this plan was eventually thwarted by Western influence and strategies. The Rapid Support Forces, led by General Dagalo, carried out a military coup in April 2023, receiving support from Europe and the United States, effectively derailing Russia's naval base plans. Changes are also quietly taking place in the Gulf of Aden. Somaliland, which has good relations with Europe and the U.S., declared independence in 1991 but has not received international recognition. In January 2024, Ethiopia signed a memorandum of understanding with Somaliland, agreeing to use Somaliland's ports and naval base for the next 50 years. This is, in essence, an indirect recognition of Somaliland's long-disputed independence by Ethiopia. With Ethiopia taking the lead, it is possible that Europe and the United States may follow suit in recognizing Somaliland's sovereignty on the international stage, opening up new negotiation opportunities. Somaliland faces a crucial choice of whether to join actions against the Houthi rebels in exchange for international recognition and support, considering its good relationship with Taiwan and U.S. influence behind the scenes. This could reshape the political landscape in the Horn of Africa. In brokering the agreement between Ethiopia and Somaliland, the European and U.S.-supported Sudanese Rapid Support Forces played a decisive role. They proposed that if Ethiopia recognized Somaliland's sovereignty and used its ports, Sudan would control the influx of refugees into the Tigray region. Ethiopia thus fell into the European and American trap. On the grand chessboard of international politics, Western countries continuously shape and maintain a world order through careful planning and foresight. In contrast, the CCP's geopolitical positioning tends to prioritize its own economic and strategic interests with limited consideration for other geopolitical players. While this may yield short-term benefits in the complex and ever-changing international landscape, the CCP may find itself in precarious situations once regional conflicts or political changes surpass its control.